Good evening. Today is April 20th, 2013. I hope everybody's had a wonderful day. A little tired right now. It's late in the evening, but I want to get this video done uh, to deal with some history I feel is very important. We're in the Metroplex right now. Tomorrow, 11:45 a.m., my wife is scheduled for knee replacement surgery at a hospital in Arlington, and we certainly request prayers of everybody that God will direct everybody involved in her care that she might receive full benefits of the surgery and will be healed and have a full recovery. I want to talk about April 20th, 1973 and 1993, respectively, 50 years ago and 30 years ago. On April 20th, 1973, I was living in Waco, and I was in my senior year, last semester of my senior year at Baylor University, getting a degree in religion and sociology. I had been accepted in graduate school to begin that fall in church state studies at Baylor. And in the meantime, it was about the same time I had accepted a position to sell books during the summer for Southwestern Company out of Nashville. So, I had a lot of things on the agenda for the remainder of the year. But on April the 20th, 1973, I was reading the Waco Tribune Herald, and I guess it was Waco Times Herald back then. And that was a Friday. In fact, it was Good Friday. And at that time, I had not yet begun attending services and engaging in fasting on Good Friday, something I began in 1979. So I was not into that yet. But it was Good Friday, 2 days before Easter. And I saw in the paper that on the Saturday night of April the 21st, there was going to be a production of the story of Esther at the New Mount Carmel Center near Elk. And it sounded interesting. And so I decided to go. And I have these story of Esther, and this was put on by a group known as the Branch Davidians. I knew that Seventh-day Adventists had been active in Waco a long time, and there have been more than one failed report over the years of the second coming of Christ being imminent. But that particular evening, I went to a lodge meeting at Waco. Oh, by the way, I also remember there was a Mexican restaurant on Waco Drive. I don't remember the name of it, but I had lunch there that day, and it was good. Again, I hadn't started doing my Good Friday fast yet. But anyway, that evening I attended Waco Lodge number 92. I was a member of there at the time, and I'm proudly a member there today. I received my 50-year pin on January 20th of this year. I was actually raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason on March the 20th of 1973. And exactly 1 month later, I stood my proficiency in the oral examination in the work of the Master Mason degree. I was already a full-fledged Mason, able to wear a ring, but before I could hold office or petition for any of the other orders, I would have to first pass my proficiency, and I did that night on Good Friday, April the 20th, 1973. The following day, I was going to go out to Mount Carmel, but I remember a friend had made a trip to the Holy Land and brought me back a Israeli shirt, and I wore that. I thought it would be appropriate for the occasion. I don't know whatever happened to that shirt. It disappeared many years ago. And I I went I went down to I was trying to find my way out there at Loop. Let's see, Loop 340 out around Belle Meade. You go down um, this road, uh, the Elk Road. What is the number of that road? It escapes me right now, but anyway, it'll come to me. And the and from there to Double E Ranch Road. Well, I got lost. You didn't have GPS back in those days, and I headed on back to Waco. Ended up in a place called Magic Music, where for the first time I met a fellow named Mike Contreras Jr. Mike was a senior at La Vega High School. He was going to be graduating the following month and coming to Baylor that fall as a freshman. I was graduating from Baylor, but coming back as a graduate student. We began hanging out together and became very good friends in a very short time. And we decided to be roommates that fall. And we maintained our friendship until Mike's death in 2016. We went out and had pizza at Paparolo's on April 21st, 1973. Then it was on April 21st, 1993, that um, Deborah and I had dinner with Mike and his wife Tina at Paparolo's. Then on April 21st, 2013, Mike and I again dined at Paparolo's. This time, the first time we celebrated our 20th, didn't want to go if Tina was not going to be there. I had planned and was looking forward to, I talked to Tina recently, and she was going to meet Deborah and I for pizza tomorrow night at Paparolo's. Celebrate what would have been 50 years of friendship. However, Deborah's surgery is going to make that impossible, but we will do that at a later time, God willing. The significance of that article being in the Waco paper, it was 20 years later, I took a copy of that to John Young, who was at the time editorial page editor for the Waco Tribune Herald. And he and I agreed, and he wrote an article about this later, that it was interesting that appeared. It showed the Davidian children dressed in bathrobes playing the part of biblical characters in the story of Esther. And one of my professors had been out to Mount Carmel a lot of times over the years, and he saw those passion plays. He didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, he could see even though they didn't have guns back in those days, there was still the theme of the passion play was rather militant, and the slaying of the Babylonians, the God's deliverance of his people, the punishment of evildoers. Well, I didn't make it to the play, but I got back and met Mike Contreras, and we had a lifelong friendship. By the way, at a later time, Mike and his father had worked at OK Machine Shop, which I understand is no longer in business. And one of their co-workers was a man named Vernon Howell, who eventually took the name of David Koresh. Well, it was on April the 20th of 1973. That article was, or that little newspaper ad was in the paper. And it was not, it was interesting because exactly 20 years later, April the 20th, 1993, Waco was in the world news. Not only was it on the front page of the Waco paper, but all over the world, because on April 19th, 1993, the Branch Davidian compound caught on fire, and 76 Davidians, including about 22 children, died, and it was truly a horrific event. And on April the 20th of 1993, 20 years later, I was again a student at Baylor. This time, though, I was a PhD candidate in world religions. I had completed all my coursework that was required in December of 1992, and I was studying for prelims. I would complete my prelims in September of 93. Then in February of 94, I would get my prospectus approved for my doctoral dissertation on Eliphas Levi and the Kabbalah. And I would actually complete the degree and receive my doctoral degree on May 13th, 1995. So it's been quite a journey. Well, what happened on that occasion? Well, on March the 20th of 1970, or April the 20th, rather, I had got the word the previous day when I was at Paul Quinn College in Dallas, where I was teaching, about the compound being on fire, and rode back to Waco with a colleague. And all the way back, we were listening to the news about the fire. The Waco Chamber of Commerce had their annual banquet scheduled. It was canceled because of the tragedy. The next day, I attended a service of prayer and lament at Central Presbyterian Church. There were people there of various faiths and no faith. There were people of various political persuasions, a lot of local politicians, and also Governor Ann Richards. And it was just a terrible tragedy. And I'm going to say April 21st, we got together to celebrate 20 years of friendship. Mike and I did, along with our wives. And when we were together 20 years later, it was just a few days after another tragedy occurred, the West explosion, West community just north of Waco on Highway 35. And that was April 17th, 2013. The following day, I attended a symposium at Truett Seminary at Baylor on the 20th anniversary of the Branch Davidian tragedy. And when Mike and I got together for dinner that Sunday night, April 21st of 2013, we learned that the following day, April 22nd, the owner of Paparolo's Rolling Duty, an old friend of mine, was going to be giving all the proceeds for the day to a rebuilding fund at West. And I was not able to be back in Waco on April 22nd, but I gave Roland $5 as a donation to that effort. He'd explained that when he first went in business, his first loan was from the West Bank and Trust, which is now known as Point West Bank. And they were the ones who handled the rebuilding fund. All these tragedies are sad, but it's interesting. As I see here on the computer screen, there's just a comment, many comments on my Facebook page, and the picture requesting prayer for my wife. And interesting, this comes from Mary Duty, the wife of Roland Duty. As my favorite psychologist, Carl Jung, would say, synchronicity. April 20th, for me, is no ordinary day. In 1973, I stood my proficiency in the Master Mason work. And by the way, the Grand Secretary for the Grand Lodge of Texas is now Justin Duty, the son of Roland and Mary Duty. So a lot of things tie together. I did my proficiency that day, and then I made plans to attend this event at New Mount Carmel Center. I didn't make it, but I met my new roommate and my lifelong friend, Mike Contreras. And 20 years later, at the time we celebrated our 20 years of friendship, we also mourned the great loss of life at Mount Carmel. And that was exactly, the news reports were exactly 20 years after that ad in the paper about the story of Esther being put on at New Mount Carmel Center. Again, I request, please pray for Deborah for her recovery from knee replacement surgery. And see y'all next time. Good night, and God bless you.